Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm really privileged to be here with you today. My name is Alessandra and I work for the UK Department for International Development. I want to thank Leap Africa for inviting DFID to contribute to this event. We really appreciate the work of Leap Africa in developing leadership and professionalism in this country. So thank you so much for having me. And so I'll jump right into it if I manage to operate this very complicated. Yes, I managed. Wow, I'm impressed. So the objective of the presentation is really to provide you with an overview of one particular form of alternative access to finance for SME. In fact, I should say access to funding because it's not really finance, and I'll explain why. Challenge funds are just only one of the tools that can be used to provide alternative options to local businesses. I hope it will be a useful overview for you. I'll try to make it quite practical. We'll look at the rationale of why challenge funds are there, the features, the process, the potential opportunities that are out there. I'll put this in the context of DFID's work on sustainable development and inclusive growth in Nigeria. But basically what you will hear from me today is about also a quite broad principles that apply across the board to also various type of challenge funds and innovation funds that are not just run by DFID but also by other institutional donors and foundations. So hopefully this will be useful for you beyond what DFID's work is. Okay. Well, right. So just for those of you who might not know what we work on, really our objective is mainly is to promote peace and justice, reduce poverty and inequality, and enhance prosperity for all. These are broad objectives in our work around the world. In particular in Nigeria, we're concentrating on some key intervention areas. We work on good governance and social development, on human development, where we include education, health, nutrition, water, and sanitation. And then we concentrate very much on inclusive economic growth, which is a concept that has already been actually mentioned by a few of the other speakers before me. We do this at DFID by providing policy advice, by promoting private sector development, the development of the local private sector, by the way, by working in different sectors like agribusiness, financial inclusion, and also on infrastructure, energy, and renewables. So in all of this, we really feel that the role of the private sector in development is essential. And because of that, we actually work through different approaches with the private sector in Nigeria, but also obviously in other countries. We do this through the more kind of traditional way of doing private sector development, as many of you know about, at the macro level, trying to improve the business environment for local enterprises, at the meso level by working with business networks and with intermediary markets like especially the financial market, as you can imagine. And then at the micro level by supporting directly, whenever possible, specific enterprise initiatives that contribute to development. And beyond the typical aid-funded programs that promote private sector development, we also do what we call direct private sector engagement, meaning that we get involved in investment promotion, we get involved in providing development capital, but also we try to promote partnerships and innovation funding that basically support new forms of inclusive business models. And we call them inclusive business models because we are really interested in working with the private sector. Obviously, we are a development institution, so we want to work with that part of the private sector that is also interested not just, let's say, in its own fundamental bottom line of profit, which is very important, but also to contribute more broadly to the socioeconomic development of the country. So that's why private sector development and private sector engagement are two key approaches for us. Sorry. Voila. I think a little bit of what has been said earlier on by the previous illustrious speakers has given you a very good overview already of what are the obstacles to SME finance in this country in particular. We've done our own research and analysis at DFID, and we found that the market and institutional context broadly, but then also specifically on the demand side and supply side of the financial sector, we found that both in terms of debt and in terms of equity, SMEs in this country, unfortunately, are still facing quite a few challenges in terms of accessing appropriate, sustainable, and affordable finance. So because of that, we thought that beyond doing the work that we do, because the topic of today for me is more specifically on challenge funds, I'll just explain how this different type of tool actually fits within our broader work. Basically, yes, we do work on try and making the financial sector deeper and reaching out to entities like your SMEs. But on the other side, we also see that we don't manage to do quite enough through that channel. Therefore, we use the tool of challenge funds and a subset that is called innovation funds. Basically, they're still challenge funds, but focusing very much on innovation. And we use this not just for financial sector deepening, but also, and this is probably useful for you to know, to support other forms of development in other sectors. So other sectors of sustainable development and inclusive economic growth. We'll go into the specific sectors. So challenge funds will look very practically at the why, the what, the who, and the how, so that you probably walk out of here knowing a little bit more about how we work with this particular type of mechanism. So, first of all, it's really important to understand the rationale of why we do this. This might look a little bit dry, a little bit boring. It's kind of donor speak, I can imagine you perceive it as that. But putting yourself in the shoes of an institutional donor that, whose mission is really to promote development in a country, if you as an SME want to understand what the challenge fund is really for you, you need to understand why we do it from our side. The main reasons is that it allows us to, I will just only go through the keywords because otherwise it's too much detail. It allows us to engage directly with the private sector and enhance the contribution of the private sector to development, avoiding excessive market distortions. It allows us through a process of competition, I've lost the paper, to actually ensure transparency and accountability, very importantly. It allows us also to use the process of innovation and to promote effectiveness, to go to scale, and very importantly, to actually promote local solutions to local problems, which means really context. And I've heard the previous speakers talking about really being steeped and embedded in the local context. It's really important when you want to try and support local enterprises. A very important element is also that by using challenge funding, what we are really doing practically is to take the initial risk that an SME is facing in testing a new business model. There should be a business model, as I repeat, that is about inclusive business, about hitting the bottom line of profit, but also contributing to socioeconomic development of the broader community. And by doing that risk sharing, by giving this non-returnable capital that I will describe better in the next slide, we actually tick the box of what we call additionality, because we cannot use taxpayers' money, because basically what we are using in our case of DFID is the money of the UK taxpayers, to intervene in a local economy without really demonstrate that basically it was essential to do it. Without that particular type of support, that very important process of innovation would have not taken place. So the additionality aspect is really important, and that's why you need to really demonstrate also from your side why that particular process of innovation is important. Okay, let me just get to the next one. Voila. The other elements that are really important when we judge whether to allocate challenge funding or not is to look at leverage, so whether we can leverage additional funding from the private sector by putting in our own funding at the beginning, by taking the initial risk. We also use challenge funding to stimulate cross-sector partnerships. It's very important for you as SMEs to be aware of the potential partnerships that you can actually develop through your business ideas across public sector, private sector, and civil society and non-profits. It's an opportunity also for capacity building for all the stakeholders involved. And last but not least, we'll look very, very carefully at the elements of sustainability, meaning at the end of the day, challenge grants are only one-off part subsidies. They are basically something that is aimed at promoting business models that become self-sustainable, and therefore, by using this type of funds with very rigorous processes, we aim at sustainability in the future. Okay. Okay, so now we go into the what. So you possibly understood a little bit about the why, and I'm going to describe about the what. So what is a challenge fund? So the most comprehensive definition that I found is that it's a fund allocated through an open and competitive application process, which provides applicants, in your case SMEs, with a one-off limited duration grant. Okay, it's a grant, it's non-returnable capital, to absorb the risks and overcome the uncertainties that inhibit innovation, research and development, and investment in new business models with a double bottom line. Mainly, basically, we are always looking at profit plus something else, which could be broad development, could be some social issues, could be some environmental issues, you name it. So what are the challenge funds really designed to achieve? They need to achieve not just the direct impact of an individual business, but broader systemic change, especially when it's done relatively at scale. They need to therefore generate positive externalities beyond what is really the initial intended kind of aim of the investment, and additionality, which I already explained. So what are the differences with other forms of funding? You might be sitting there and thinking, oh, well, okay, it's a call for proposal, it's a tender, what is it? I mean, we've seen loads of these things floating around as opportunities. Well, let's say it does work through the mechanism of a call for proposal, but because it's challenge funding, it has its own peculiarities. It's really about defining a desired outcome. We want local enterprises to go out there, test their business models, and achieve outcomes which are, again, not just profit, but also social, environmental, or broad developmental outcomes. But we are not dictating, as it is done sometimes with some tenders and call for proposal, exactly how that should be done. Because the whole point is about challenging the local private sector, that's why it's called Challenge Fund, to come up with their own ideas, their own solutions, their own models, their own innovations. So it's really a very peculiar way of allocating funding and using it to absorb the initial risk for kind of desirable, innovative models. Let me just try to, and then of course, very importantly, it allows for multiple winners. So it's not just for one project, it's actually for a multitude, normally for a multitude of innovative ideas that come up with, for a particular developmental challenge. Importantly, because this actually complements the other forms of access to finance that you might find out there, challenge funds are about non-returnable capital, but let's be careful, there is no such thing as free money. It's non-returnable as capital, as money, it's a grant, but in reality, the donors that provide challenge funding, and this is not just DFID, any donor that you talk to, they expect a social return on investment, what you call SROI, yeah? Social return on investment. It's really important to keep in mind for your business strategy that challenge funds are a great opportunity if it fits with what you are trying to achieve. However, they are only meant to complement and not substitute the role of the financial sector in this country. That's why we at DFID, but also other stakeholders in development, do work in parallel, both on financial sector deepening and on provision of challenge funding and innovation funding for particular developmental objectives. So I hope that the message is clear. It's not a substitute, it's a complement. Test a new model, or because it's helping you to roll out an already tested model, or because it's helping you to actually scale up something that has already been rolled out in one location. Very importantly, remember that, again, no money is free money. There are certain costs that your enterprise will have to absorb anyway. There are some non-admissible costs like capital expenditure, construction costs, etc., that cannot be covered by challenge funds. There are also sunk costs. You will be investing in designing a new model, in designing a project, and that initial design investment, unfortunately, cannot be covered by challenge funds. Okay? But obviously, they cover all the other project-related costs. Okay. In terms of who can apply for funding, so that's the who, it's a range of organizations. Normally, if we are talking about inclusive business models, that would be commercially oriented organizations, they could be local companies, but again, they need to have a double bottom line, as I explained earlier on. The eligibility criteria vary quite a lot, but let me show you some that are really, you find almost in every challenge fund and innovation fund across the landscape. You have to have a proven track record of legal and ethical operations, maybe for X number of years being in business, evidence of operational capacity, of know-how in your particular sector of expertise. You have to have proof of legal registration, all the relevant documentation, something that demonstrates that you have a sound corporate governance structure and that you have a sound financial system. And then some key financial, company policies like corporate social responsibilities and others. Now, how is challenge funding allocated and managed? Now, this is the how, is the process, and it's really important for you to observe this. I'll just look only through the keyword. Let's skip through the keyword. It's a donor-led design, so it's really the institutional donor that designs the overall framework for the challenge fund. However, a fund manager is normally appointed. It could be the program implementing partner that is already out there, or it could be a separate fund manager. There is a process of advertising. The information is always out there throughout all the media, so you can't really miss it if you're, if you're a bit careful. There is a process of application that normally is in 2 steps. It's always about developing first a short concept, and then if you pass the first stage, you would have to present a very detailed business plan. And then there's a process of assessment and feedback, which is run by an independent panel to ensure that the process is really transparent, that is really run with the right level of expertise, and that there is no conflict of interest. Match funding is very important. Challenge funds always ask for some contribution, could be varying by 20% to 50% of the grant from the company that receives the money. The process of award happens only after there has been a due diligence process, and also after you have signed a grant agreement that specifies what outcomes are expected of you according to precise milestones. There are also clauses on breaches and non-delivery, obviously. The implementation and oversight is run by the fund manager or the program implementing partner, but very importantly, the institutional donor continues to be involved constantly throughout the process with monitoring and evaluation and with audits, appointing also external evaluators when needed. And finally, really important, the challenge funds are not just out there to kind of distribute grants and just hope that things go for the best, but actually it's about really seeing what impact is out there, where the value for money has been achieved in terms of economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and equity. And really all of this should help, or is in fact helping all the stakeholders to learn what works and what doesn't work, and then to model further and improve. This is a very quick diagram that I did to just show you that the development donor, yes, thank you. The development donor is using basically a fund manager through an independent assessment panel to deliver the funds to the grantees. That's just the governance structure. If it was a flow diagram, you would see that then the development donor is receiving obviously the funding from the taxpayers. The grantees are returning 2 main things: the impact on the local community. Obviously, they're making money for their own bottom line as businesses, and they're also giving a social return on investment to their initial to the institutional donor. In terms of just showing 3 examples, just to mention that we've had recently an enterprise challenge fund with our growth and employment in states program. We will circulate these slides so that you can actually access all the information through the websites. With DFID, which is Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access, or what is missing there, we are promoting an innovation fund for financial inclusion. And with a program called Deepen, we are actually setting up a challenge fund for low-cost education sector. And it's just, fund manager is just being appointed this summer. I conclude by giving you a few tips that hopefully will be useful. It's about really having a feasibility checklist, as I call it, for potential applicants. You as SMEs, you as CEOs of SMEs, when you consider challenge funding and a subset maybe of innovation funding in particular, and think whether you are going to go through the whole process of applying, hoping to get the money, deliver the project, etc. you really have to ask yourself a number of questions. I've listed a few there about whether challenge funding is really right for your company. Does it fit with your business strategy? Is there enough alignment between your objectives and the objectives of the development donor? Is your company promoting really an innovative, cost-effective model to hit two bottom lines? Have you explored other viable sources of finance before turning to challenge funding? Have you considered the eligibility criteria, the complex process? Can you expect other benefits beyond funding? Is it also about learning? Is it about exposure? Finally, if you still, after all those questions, believe that challenge funding is useful for you, then just make sure that you know where to monitor for the opportunities, and also where is your entry point for information and application process. It's normally the fund manager level. It's not directly the institutional donor, but it's the fund manager or program implementing partner of the donor. And finally, again, we will share these slides with you. I would advise that if you're interested, to monitor opportunities, in particular for DFID, you go to the International Development Funding website, and you can also use the development tracker page of DFID in Nigeria in particular, where you can see all the list of our about 49 active programs and check whether there is challenge funding or innovation funding they're interested in. I also advise that you do then identify the particular DFID funded programs that are aligning with the field of expertise or operation of your company, and you go to the websites of individual DFID funded programs, as I say. Thank you. Thank you very much.